He walked through the doorway with a calm that didn't match anything inside the cabin. The camcorder on the table recorded everything as Charles Ng moved with deliberate steps, checking restraints, adjusting the chair, and making sure nothing looked out of place. The tape captured a world hidden in the Sierra Nevada foothills, a place where screams had been swallowed by thick trees and the isolation of a remote survivalist compound. The camera had been left running by accident, but it revealed the truth that investigators would spend months trying to understand. The room was small, cluttered, and unnaturally quiet, until the sound of a woman begging for her life broke through the speakers when detectives finally hit play. The story began years earlier when Ng first met Leonard Lake. Lake was older, a former Marine with a paranoid obsession about government collapse and a belief that society was headed toward a violent end. He retreated into survivalism with a zeal that blurred into delusion. Ng, younger and already drifting toward crime, found in Lake a mentor who encouraged his darkest impulses. They shared ideas about dominance, control, and what Lake called his right to take whatever he wanted. It was a partnership built on shared cruelty. By the time the two men settled on a plot of land near Wilseyville, California, their plans had already moved far beyond idle fantasies. Lake constructed a bunker on the property, a hidden room buried beneath dirt and concrete. He designed it as a fallout shelter, but it didn't take long before its purpose changed. The space became a holding area, a place where victims were kept, recorded, and broken down. Neighbors rarely saw anything unusual because the cabin sat deep among trees, accessed only by a winding dirt road. The isolation gave them cover. People who came there rarely left. The case began to unravel on a quiet June afternoon in 1985. Ng walked into a lumber store in South San Francisco and tried to steal a bench vise by slipping it into his backpack. When employees confronted him, he fled, leaving the pack behind. Inside it, officers found a loaded pistol with a silencer and a receipt for a storage unit in nearby South San Francisco. Lake arrived at the store shortly after, posing as Ng's companion. When officers questioned him, he swallowed 2 cyanide capsules he had hidden on his person. He collapsed in front of them and died 4 days later in the hospital. With his death, the investigation shifted immediately. If someone carried cyanide, something catastrophic was being hidden. Detectives searched the storage unit and found sealed buckets filled with items that didn't belong together. ID cards, women's clothing, jewelry, duct tape, and handwritten lists describing abduction and control. They found journals where Lake detailed his belief in a right to dominate women, describing them as property. It was enough to secure warrants for the property in Wilseyville. What investigators found there surpassed anything they had expected. The compound looked ordinary from the outside, but the smell hit them first. A thick, chemical odor mixed with something burned. Behind the cabin, they found a shallow grave and a pile of charred bone fragments scattered through a fire pit. The bunker was hidden behind a false wall inside a shed. When officers pried the wall open, flashlights revealed a cramped room with no windows, lined with hooks, restraints, and a mattress on the floor. A clipboard on the wall listed rules written in Lake's handwriting. In the corner was a small video camera, still mounted on a tripod. Investigators spent days sifting through the property. They found countless burned bone fragments, enough to suggest multiple victims. Forensic teams reconstructed what they could, identifying a few individuals through dental records and personal effects. But the most horrifying evidence came from the videotapes. When detectives played them, they saw Lake calmly addressing the camera, explaining his desires and the purpose of the bunker. In one recording, Ng appeared beside him. Together, they forced victims to follow orders, begging, crying, trying to negotiate for their lives. The videos showed women bound to chairs, pleading as Lake questioned them. On another tape, Ng was heard laughing. The recordings were methodical, staged, and shockingly casual, as if the men believed their actions were justified. The investigation linked the two men to disappearances stretching across Northern California, a young couple who vanished after answering an ad, families who were never seen again, and individuals who had last been spotted near Lake's property. Some victims were believed to have been killed for supplies, others for money, and others simply because they fit the pair's violent fantasies. The full number of victims became difficult to determine because so many remains were burned or scattered. Forensic teams estimated at least a dozen, possibly more, but the tapes and journals suggested an even higher count. Ng fled the country shortly after the lumber store incident, crossing into Canada under a false identity. He was arrested there for shooting a security guard during a robbery. After serving time in a Canadian prison, he fought extradition to the United States for 6 years, arguing that he would face the death penalty. The legal battle dragged on until 1991, when he was finally returned to California to stand trial for multiple murders. The trial was one of the most expensive in state history. Prosecutors presented the tapes, journals, physical evidence, and testimony from forensic experts. They argued that Ng was an active participant, not a passive observer. Defense attorneys claimed Ng had been controlled by Lake, portraying him as manipulated and afraid. But the videos contradicted that. Jurors saw Ng interacting with victims, assisting Lake, and carrying out tasks inside the bunker. After months of testimony, they found him guilty on multiple counts of murder. In 1999, Ng was sentenced to death. He remained on death row at San Quentin, maintaining that he had been unfairly blamed for Lake's crimes. But investigators, prosecutors, and forensic analysts agreed that both men had acted together, feeding off each other's violence in a remote cabin designed for torture. The evidence left little doubt about the roles they played or the suffering they inflicted. The case remained one of the darkest in California's history, a hidden world uncovered only by chance, a stolen vice, a forgotten backpack, and a partner who chose to swallow poison rather than face what he had done. The tapes continued to live in evidence lockers, reminders of how two men created a place where victims were recorded, controlled, and erased. The remote property in Wilseyville was eventually cleared, but the ground held memories that no amount of excavation could fully erase. Thank you for listening to Homicide Files. Subscribe for more true crime stories.